Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum and I am joined today by Charles Taylor, who is Managing Director here at Movie Armaments Group and possibly dictator of Liberia, right?
No,
Just same name.
same name.
All right, so we're up here in Toronto, Canada, and you guys have a tremendous collection. You can get just sort of the briefest hint of it from our background here. A tremendous collection of firearms of all types and ages, including a bunch of cool historical stuff that I've been up here filming. But you have an actual business to run, which is movie guns. So give in an overview, what all do you guys do?
Well, first of all, this company has been over 30 years collecting firearms for the film industry. And we not only supply firearms specifically for the film industry, but for law enforcement training and military training as well, like foreign weapons courses and things like that. But our primary business is the film industry. So we bring in the firearms as requested, or we had an inventory of weapons, and then we do all the blank firing adaptions to each one of those weapons.
Okay, so obviously the guys doing movies aren't actually using live guns. They're not shooting live ammo, presumably.
No, they don't use live ammo today. They did in the early days of filmmaking. They did use Tommy guns and rifles and shot animals for real and stuff like that, but we don't do that anymore.
Wow. Yeah, I'm not surprised. So I think a lot of people, I'm sure, don't understand just how difficult it is to convert guns to blank firing. We have a little bit of it, those of us who aren't in the movie industry, we have a little bit of vision into this sort of world in the reenacting community, where they often try to convert guns to blank firing. And you'll often hear like these wisps of rumors about how this such and such gun doesn't work well with blanks and how it's really hard to convert this to blanks. And you guys have it even worse because you have to convert to blanks but make the gun look externally like it's live. You can't have some big BFA hanging off the front of a gun in a movie.
Yeah, you are very correct. When it comes to blank firing weapons, there's such a wide variety of styles and operation, gas systems, recoil operated, gas impingement, whatever. And each firearm has a very specific way of blanking. We'll just take a Beretta pistol for an instance. Okay. That is a delayed blowback style weapon, and what we do is we thread the barrel, okay, and we remove the locking lugs in where the receiver is, and it's as simple as that, and the gun will cycle. And we put different blank firing adapters in the barrel, whether it's a quarter flash or full flash or solid plug or whatever the scene requires for that particular weapon. We will make the weapon fire whatever the specific blank we want. But some other guns, like maybe a Glock 17, is a little bit more difficult because we have barrels that need to move down, like a SIG 226, something like that, where the barrel has to pitch down and come back in order for it to make contact with the ejector. Mm-hmm. So the modification to a Glock is much different than a Beretta.
Okay, interesting. So it sounds like what you're doing is basically converting these things from locked action guns all into straight blowback so that you can then reduce the muzzle, restrict the muzzle, and get enough gas pressure to cycle the thing.
That's correct. I mean, when we're talking about revolvers, there's very little we have to do. We like to put a blank firing adapter in the muzzle of a revolver purely to help enhance the muzzle flash. Because as blanks are firing, you're having this burning gunpowder that's flying down the barrel, and if it has no restriction whatsoever, it burns and a lot of unburnt powder goes out the front and you're not getting the full volume of the flash that you want. Okay. So you put a restrictor in there of a very specific size that helps the powder burn in the barrel and come out as a flame versus coming out as a bunch of sparks.
Okay. I don't know that I would have thought about it, but in movies, the only thing you know that shows you the gun's working is going to be the flash.
And if you take something like the AR-15 or the M16, direct gas impingement type firearm, some people think you put the standard military top hat style of blank firing adapter underneath the muzzle brake and it'll work just fine. Not the case. Okay. There are other modifications that we do to the gas hole and the extractor spring, the hammer spring, the size of the buffer to enhance the full auto operation. People have heard in the past light primer strike happens on M16s or M4s in full auto. Well, it's worse on blanks than it is with live. So okay, we make the modifications to make the weapon function more flawlessly.
It's like this is a whole world of gunsmithing all unto itself with its separate engineering problem of I have to make it work, but not actually throw a projectile downrange.
That's correct. And also, with respect to the blanks, you're having a blank cartridge that has a totally crimped forend on it. And when it opens up, you have the potential of having small fragments of brass that will go down the barrel and it's going to come out the front and potentially out the side of a flash hider or within 20 feet of the end of the muzzle can potentially cause harm to someone.
You don't want to shoot Bruce Willis in the face.
Apparently that's a bad thing. I've worked with Bruce a few times and he's a pretty cool guy, but we're all about safety and making sure that everybody's safe. And therefore, that's why we develop blanks that are solid plug, meaning the barrel is completely plugged solid and for like an M16, this action will cycle, but nothing comes out the front. And you do that for suicide shots and close and whatever. John Wick is a good example of that movie where a lot of solid plugs are used in a lot of the choreography and they put the muzzle flash in later.
Okay.
So that's the reason why we have different loads of blanks.
Okay. Something you had mentioned earlier was like the difference between full flash, half flash, and quarter flash often depends on how close the actor is to the target. Like if I'm shooting someone from this close, you need a lesser power blank.
Yes, and let's start with the fact that most people in film sets don't like guns anyways. So if we use full flash, it's loud, it's really loud, guns are loud, and some people don't want you to use full flash no matter what the scene is, it's just too loud. But we want to have the largest flash possible so the camera can see it, and it's more effective in the action sequences and gunfire and muzzle flash and explosions and all those things. But sometimes you just can't use a full flash because people are just too close.
Okay.
So we go down to a half flash or a quarter flash, and it's specifically that. It's less powder, but it makes the flash smaller and smaller and smaller, and therefore stunt people, actors, if they're close to the muzzle, can be closer or a little bit offset, and there's less danger of anybody getting hit with anything or hurt. And, knock on wood, I've never hurt anybody. And we've done hundreds of millions of rounds over the last 25 years on set, and we've never hurt anybody.
Nice. That brings up another question I never even thought about myself. I would expect that blanks are as loud as live gunfire. What's the ear protection situation on movie sets? Do they do it? Are the blanks actually quiet enough that you don't need to?
No, the only blanks that are quiet enough that we don't use ear protection would be the solid plugs, and that is purely dependent on the type of firearm. Like a Beretta solid plug is like a pop, 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 but a solid plug with an M4 is a little bit more like a firecracker kind of sound. But we generally give people ear protection all the time, little foamies cut, flesh color inside in the ears, whatever. And when crew, they're always wearing ear protection and face shields and other protection.
Okay. So if I look really close in movies, will I be able to start picking out little foam earplugs in people?
No, hopefully not.
Okay.
No, I've seen it where it's been done, where somebody puts a bright orange earplug in and they notice it after take 3, but not on my deal. I'd say no. Flesh color or not at all.
Okay. Well, you have a handful of guns here on the table that hopefully you are going to show me. So what do we have here?
Well, first of all, what I was going to show you is what we discussed, I put my eyes on, discuss about the Beretta. Now, the Beretta, I showed you this earlier, where the only 2 things that we need to do to a Beretta 92 FS is to cut off the locking lugs.
Okay.
So that the lug area, in this area of the weapon, it doesn't lock anymore.
Let me interrupt you there and let me bring the camera back closer so everyone else can see what you're talking about there.
Okay, so on the Beretta, you'll see this cutout in the slide and the same corresponding cutout in the frame. I'm just going to remove the slide out of the way. So the locking lug that is here, you can see it kind of shiny. We've actually cut it off. So you see it where the barrel recoils back and forth when it cycles, and when it goes into battery, it locks and then it unlocks during the extraction process. So what we've done is we've removed the lock from the slide area as well. So nothing is stopping the slide from running back and forth. And as well, we have threaded the end of the barrel to accept a metric style, a metric diameter screw that goes inside with a very specific hole size depending on whether we're using half, quarter, full, or solid plugs. So this is one of the simplest blank firing adaptions that can be made on pistols. Anything that's like a blowback Beretta style, Taurus, they're all pretty much the same in that respect.
Okay.
Now, on the Glock 17, here is a regular Glock 17 live fire weapon. And you'll see how the slide moves back and forth and the barrel comes and locks up in battery.
Right, the locking surfaces.
Yeah, the
on top
locking
of the barrel,
surfaces are there. Now, here is a standard style ramp barreled blank firing adaptation to it that shows you clearly the difference between here and here.
Okay.
Now, one of the things with the Glock 17, the hardest thing about blanks in this particular kind of adaptation is getting the barrel to drop down, link down, so that the ejector can hit the empty case. Because if we just did this, the slide would just move back and forth and the case would never eject.
Right.
So what we need to do is we need to get the barrel to link down. And in doing that, there's machining on the underside of the barrel that allows that to take place. And there's another modification that we can do, which could be a solidly fixed barrel that does not have this, and then the slide will just be straight blowback.
Okay.
And the barrel's in a fixed position. Now, there is a double-edged sword with this type versus the other, is this has a delay in the blowback, which allows the powder to burn. You have a tighter blank firing adapter inside, and therefore the flash is potentially larger with this style versus the fixed barrel style.
Okay.
And with a blowback gun that doesn't have a delay in it, you can get gunpowder spitting out of the back if it's not locked up or it unlocks too soon. So I like this one because it doesn't spit.
Okay.
The
That makes
blowback,
sense.
like a Beretta, sometimes will spit gunpowder in your face if you use a full load. And sometimes we have to modify the adapters, and the adapters are just like these. These are basically hardened set screws that have a hole drilled in them that are specifically drilled to this style of blank. Now, you'll notice that there's some that are of different lengths. And those different lengths are specifically whether this is a stronger blank or not a strong blank, and the length of the blank firing adapter and the angle at which the gunpowder hits the screw can modify the muzzle flash. The flash
okay.
can change. The actual physical characteristics of the flash can change.
There's a lot that goes into this.
A bit.
That's neat. I wouldn't have normally thought, I don't think a lot of people think about how much detail there really is going into just blank firing. And you really have to be an experienced gunsmith to make this work right.
I think I'm lucky because I started off life as a tool and die maker. So I had all the machining applications long before I started doing firearms, and bringing a lot of that manufacturing techniques into this is easy for me. And when it comes to blank firing, there's a lot of people that try to do it at home and think, well, I can have my live fire gun fire blanks. And if it's a single shotgun and you don't do anything to the gun, sure, you get one shot and you're not going to hurt anything other than the fact your gun's going to get really dirty. But I recommend that nobody converts their guns to fire blank unless you're a gunsmith and have the technical aptitude to do it.
Yeah,
because
for sure.
in some of the weapons that we do, the difference between a firearm working effectively and flawlessly on a full load, full flash, high pressure, because the gunpowder we're using is sometimes double or triple the amount that's actually in a rifle case. We might use double the powder in there for a bigger flash, let's say a 50 caliber machine gun.
Okay.
If we use a 50 caliber and it's not blank firing properly, it's going to blow up and people are going to get hurt.
Yeah.
So I don't recommend anybody try this at home or by themselves. Let somebody who's qualified to do it, or leave it to the movie guys to do it.
And the gas, if you don't have, even with a restrictor, I assume, the high pressure gas that comes out the muzzle from a blank can do serious injury or kill someone.
We have an
Contact
actor that
range.
died some years ago, John Eric Hexum, that it was a very sad state where he took a revolver and put it up against his head, and they were sort of playing this Russian roulette game, not understanding that blanks are dangerous, and put it up at the side of his head, and the gas pressure's got to go somewhere,
Right.
and it killed him.
So they're not toys. Even if they're blank firing, they're definitely not toys.
Yeah, we've had that a lot on film sets where some people treat it like it's it's just a blank. No, it's not. And generally, when I'm doing a big production, I have lots of background performers and people that don't understand guns. I usually will do the melon or the apple trick with a 9mm pistol and said, if anybody has any ideas that these aren't real and they can't hurt, everybody stick your fingers in your ears, and I take a 9mm pistol, put it up against an apple, and I pull the trigger and the apple goes kaboom. And people, you don't need to tell them anything more than
I
that.
bet not.
They understand it. Or you take a piece of cardboard or foam or something. We've done it with 50 caliber machine guns where we actually had disagreements with production staff that wanted to be closer when we're shooting machine guns. And I would say, no, the camera can be there, but you can't. And strictly because of how deadly dangerous the 50 caliber machine gun firing full load blanks can be. And you do a test for them, like I did on Death Race.
Okay.
And once the test was over, nobody said a word. People were running for ear protection. They were like, holy crap, that's loud, it's big, it's scary. And you say, you know, you really, seriously, you have to listen to us. When we did Death Race, we had lots of machine guns. We have 20mm Vulcan cannons from my friend Mike Papik in Los Angeles, and he was up and all the guys were up. We had 20, 30 machine guns all firing at the same time, different calibers, miniguns, all things going. And when we say, stay out in front of, get away from the front of the weapons, put your ear protection on. We're not doing that just because it's fun. We want to make sure everybody goes home at the end of the day. We have our explosions, the cars are spinning, stunt guys are doing their thing, and everybody gets to go home at the end of the day and have fun. That's our ultimate goal.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And of course, for the people who don't, you know, when you've got a whole bunch of extras in the background who aren't actually shooting, you guys have piles of rubber guns that look like the right, you know, look like the real thing from a from an appropriate distance.
We're in some other areas of the world that do filming. A lot of times they just use the real weapons, but we here, mostly in North America, say if you don't need to use a real weapon in a scene, don't use it. It's easier to have a replica, like an airsoft replica of something, or rubber guns that you've made that the art department has painted, and you know from 10 feet away you can't tell. Or there's a stunt that's happening and you don't want the guy to have a real gun because if he falls and lands on it, he could spear himself. So we bring everything into play on set every day to make sure that nobody gets hurt, and no stunt guy's gonna go home with bandages on because I got poked in the eye or something. We just wanna make sure everybody goes home safe.
Makes sense to me. Pretty cool. You guys are also in this cool legal position of being able to purchase and own a lot of stuff that's difficult for other people to get, which is part of why I'm up here, because you guys are able to have all manner of interesting machine guns.
Yeah. One of the things we learned a long time ago was like before the post-86 dealer sample issues and the Firearms Act and whatever, in Canada, we had a license that allowed my business partner and I to possess anything, which meant like a section, we have a criminal code called Section 93. Under 93, we had the golden goose egg permit that said, this section of the law does not apply to you. Basically, you can have whatever you want for the film industry. When the new laws came out, we approached our government and said, you know, the film industry needs very specific things. So the new permitting, the new Firearms Act allows us to purchase whatever we want, and I mean whatever. Rockets, bombs, missiles, any of those things that we require for the film industry or our training, but the licensing is very stringent. Sure. Every firearm has a number, every item, high capacity magazine has a number, and I feel bad for some of the armorers in the United States that struggle trying to put together 35 AK-47s where they have to buy semis and manufacture them into fulls and all those things instead of being able to just pick up the phone and buy them. It's hard for the guys in Los Angeles. I know they're my friends. We talk about it all the time. And for us, we're lucky. When I first did a show with them at the SHOT Show, they asked me how many AKs you had. And I said, I don't know, 400, something like that. And their eyes almost boggled out of their head. Well, that's because our government said we can't.
Right.
We have a legitimate legal reason to have them, and no, they're not going to be on the range, and no, we're not going to take them out and sell them to people. It's just purely, strictly for the film industry.
Right. Well, very cool. I'm certainly in your debt for the opportunity to come up here and film. I really appreciate that.
Oh, we really appreciate you having you come up here. We've got a lot of really cool stuff, and I'm glad you showed up.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So, if you're in the movie industry in Canada, I'm sure you already know about these guys, but if you don't, check them out. Movie Armament Group, or Armaments Group with an S, up in Toronto. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Now, unfortunately, my job requires me to put some rounds through some blank firing guns, like Harley Quinn's revolver from Suicide Squad. It's like it has no recoil at all. Next up, Jessica Biel's full auto Beretta 92 from the remake of Total Recall. Turns out things are more controllable when there's no projectile going downrange. I see what you were talking about, though. That one did spit a little bit of powder back at me. All right. This is, of course, a Mark 18. Nothing particularly fancy special about it. It was one of the guns that was used with the SWAT teams, also in Suicide Squad. I'm curious to see just how much flash comes out when you've got blanks intended for a lot of flash. So let's see. That's a lot of concussion from that thing. And an incredible amount of flash. What do we have left in there? We got a few left. And I knocked something off the shelf about 10 feet away because these aren't toys. All right, and we will finish this off with the pièce de résistance. Deadshot's actual rifle from Suicide Squad. The one, the only, the real one. And this is with half flash blanks. That's pretty cool. That rate of fire is substantially lower, presumably because half flash blanks have a lot less powder in them. That's actually a lot more pleasant to shoot than the Mark 18. Deadshot chose well, clearly.